Hi everybody and welcome to today's Faith Moment. I've called today's Faith Moment Resting Your Mind, Resting Your Mind. And that's because I think at the moment, one of the most exhausted parts of us is our mind. There's so much information coming at us, so many things to remember to do, etc. Worries and fears. If we're not careful, it's our minds that get exhausted first. So I'm going to share a few thoughts about resting your mind, and it's a journey that I'm on myself, so it's not something I'm saying to you, I'm saying with you. How do we learn to rest our minds? One of the first things that the doctors often have to do if somebody has a breakdown is to put them into a sort of sleep so that they can rest their minds. It's our minds that whir and that churn and that can stop us from sleeping properly and resting properly. So how can our mind rest? Well, I think we're facing an unprecedented in my lifetime challenge of information. Whether you're reading papers, following the news, or just talking with people. I don't know if you've noticed, but you walk past people talking on the street, and not quite as much now, but until now probably, a lot was a talk about COVID. And now it's sort of part of the conversation, but it's still there in everything. What can you do? What can't you do? What's the latest on the news? Afghanistan, all the big issues that we're facing. There's so much coming at us. And we've only got little minds. We can only cope with so much. And part of my cry to God is help me to think about the things that you want me to think about and not to waste my mind thinking about things that you don't want me to, because there's some things I can't do anything about, but there's some things I can. So Lord, where should my mind be? And Psalm 131 is a psalm that I've been living in for the last few weeks, and I just wanted to share some thoughts with you. It's a very beautiful psalm. And it starts off by saying, "O Lord, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. O Lord, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high." It's a picture there of a little boy just looking up, looking a little bit worried. And another little boy in bed at night looking up, again, worried. Our hearts can be lifted up and our eyes raised too high. And I think at the start of all this COVID stuff, I was asking the big questions of why, what, when. I think I've learned that my brain isn't big enough for that. My mind's not strong enough. I have to just sometimes let God be God and say my heart's not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. I know my limitations of what I can cope with. I don't occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. There's a time to seek and to delve and to desire the bigger things of God. But there's also a time, I think, for being quiet and being small and recognizing our own limitations. Increasingly, I'm resting with God rather than asking questions or trying. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. I think I've said earlier that one of the things I'm doing is actually not watching the news after a certain time. I don't watch television anymore, but I don't watch the internet news. I'm not looking for new information after a certain time. I'm just processing what the day is given and what's happening and what I need to do in the evening. I'm not looking for new stuff coming in after a certain time of the day. Because at the end of the day, the news won't be that different in the morning than it was in the evening. So I can catch up with things in the morning. And I'm having to put some boundaries, some barriers around my mind, if you like, to stop it from running after certain things, wanting to understand, wanting to try, wanting to do, and to say, actually, you need to rest a little bit. So a practical thing I'm doing is not watching the news later on in the evening because it gets too much. And actually, it doesn't help my prayer. I could pray just as well without that. So the psalmist says, I don't occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. I've learned my limitations. I've learned my size. I've learned to be small with God. But this is what he does do. But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. My soul is like the weaned child that is with me. Just take this verse. This is a decision that he's made. It's an action that he's taken. It's something that he's done. And it's something that we need to do. I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with its mother. There's a picture there of a young child who's been weaned. It's no longer sucking on the breast. It's no longer crying when it wants food and all of that in that same way. It's become a little bit older now. It's not demanding in the same way. It will demand it when it gets hungry, but it's not constantly attaching. It's a weaned child, a child that's that little bit older now, a child that's resting in her mother's arms there, and able just to enjoy her mum, enjoy the cuddle, enjoy the presence of her mum, enjoy the warmth of her mum. And there's something of that here with God, of not panting and wanting from God, but just resting our souls with God. Secure in his embrace, secure in his love, secure in his presence. But this is a decision, it's a choice that we have. I have calmed and quieted my soul. You will know what you need to do to make that more possible. For me, it was some practical things like not doing certain things after a certain time in the evening, not watching new information. You'll know what works for you. It may be physicality of going for a walk or some exercise, or it may be a quiet space, looking out of the window, depending on how well we are. It might be all sorts of things. But what works for you? But it's your action that you take. I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with its mother. I've remembered in whose arms I rest. My soul is like the weaned child that is with me. We have a choice of how to live in these next days and weeks. I think the worry and the fear will only exhaust us. We need to find our own way to rest our souls with God, to rest our minds. And as we do, from that resting place, the psalm finishes off. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time on and forevermore. This place of rest reminds us whose arms we lie in, and it gives us the courage to hope from this time on and forevermore, to hope in the Lord. I want to take just a moment of quietness now. I'm going to put that picture back on of a child just in his mother's arms. Maybe just take your own spiritual health check at the moment. Is your mind too tired? Has it become too exhausted? And then just ask, what can I do? What's the action that I need to take to become calm and quieted, or even a little bit more calmed and quieted? What's the next step of my own actions? And just before you go into that time of quiet, this time of tiredness has taken us a while to get to. It's going to take a while to get out. So it's small steps. What's the next thing that I can do to calm and quiet my soul, like a weaned child with its mother? What's the next step for you? Let's pray. So Father, guide each of us in our own next steps of what we can do to calm and quiet our souls with you. Just take a few moments of quietness. So let's pray. Lord, as you continue to guide us, help us to be honest, to be real with you, and to let you show us the next steps for each of us. For those of us who are tired, it's taken time to get to this place. Help us to find our own next steps and walking into a good and fresh stride with you, to rest our minds in your presence. Thank you. So finding rest for our minds then finds rest for our bodies, our souls. God bless you and God keep you.